Biorhythm is maybe one of the most impactful mechanics to ever come out of the Tellius games. Said no one ever. Yeah, Biorhythm, it kind of sucks. It's a very memed-on mechanic that a lot of people like to make fun of. And whenever I'm streaming Path of Radiance or Radiant Dawn, chat constantly tells me to check Biorhythm on my units because they know it annoys me. No, I will not check Biorhythm. Shut up. But here's the thing about Biorhythm. I actually think that at some point, the developers had bigger plans for it. In fact, I think it was supposed to be a very integral mechanic of the two games it was in, but they kind of never really found a way to make it work, so they kind of just left it in as a little bit of a miscellaneous feature. And the reason why I'm saying that is that the two Tellius games actually have a very strong theme to them. You may not have noticed it that much in Path of Radiance, but you would have certainly noticed it in Radiant Dawn, and that is the theme of order versus chaos. Throughout the plot of the two Tellius games, we see a big battle take place between the agents of order and the agents of chaos. Humans are very much supposed to represent order, whereas the Lagoos are chaos. And this is also represented in the Divine. On one side, you got Yune, the god of chaos. Wild, free, flowing, ever-changing, unrestrained. On the other side, you have the goddess of order, Ashera. Strict, unbending, rigid, stern, but also safe. And one thing that I find incredibly cool about Ashera as a boss is that she is the only unit in the Tellius series that doesn't have Biorhythm. It's just flats. Now, this of course doesn't matter because Biorhythm doesn't matter, but looking at this, I can't help but think that maybe at some point during development, it was supposed to. And in this video, I'm going to give you guys a couple of suggestions on how I personally would fix Biorhythm as a mechanic. Now, before I get into specifics, I thought I'd just refresh your memory a little bit. Maybe you haven't played the Tellius games, or maybe it's been a while, so let me just explain very briefly what Biorhythm is. It's a mechanic exclusive to Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn. It is something that you can check by viewing a unit's stat screen, and it just makes your unit's stats fluctuate a little bit. When the Biorhythm is good, you get small bonuses to hit and avoid. When it's bad, you get small penalties to hit and avoid. In Path of Radiance, it's pretty much the same for every single unit. There are some characters who have personal skills that interacts with it a little bit, but overall, it's a pretty forgettable mechanic. Biorhythm is not just limited to playable characters, enemies have it too. In fact, every single character in the game has Biorhythm, but it's rarely checked because its bonuses are so small. In Radiant Dawn, they made some slight changes to Biorhythm. They doubled its bonuses and penalties, making it a little bit more impactful. They also added various forms of Biorhythm to different characters. And they also made it so that Biorhythm affects your chance to proc skills as well as finding hidden items. You could also use special Heron songs as well as the Matrona staff to set a character's Biorhythm to good, but these tools were only really given to the player in the last chapters of the game, and thus most people just kinda ignored them. Overall, I'd say that Radiant Dawn really made a lot of improvements to the Biorhythm mechanic, but it didn't really change the core of the issue, which is that no one really cares about it. So how would I make people care about Biorhythm? Well, let's start with my first suggestion, which is also the most boring one, and that is to simply increase the numbers. Now, I'm including this suggestion here in this video because it certainly is a way to fix the problem, but I don't think it would really improve the game for the better. You could simply just increase the numbers of the Biorhythm to force players to pay attention to it, and it would work. Let's say, for example, that good Biorhythm increased your bonuses by 30%, while bad Biorhythm decreased them by 30%. Suddenly, this is a very impactful mechanic that you have to pay attention to. You would constantly need to check your units to ensure they don't have bad Biorhythm. You would actually be incentivized to turtle on some maps and wait until enemies have bad Biorhythm, particularly strong bosses you would not want to engage while they're at maximum. And overall, I think this would just slow down the game and make it a lot more frustrating. It's kind of like putting a traffic light on a racetrack where you have to stop your car because there's a red light, and you're kind of just sitting there waiting for the light to turn green again. This isn't fun, it wouldn't make the mechanic better, it would just make it more annoying. So yeah, while this technically is a way to force players to care about Biorhythm, it wouldn't make it better. So let's move on to my next suggestion. So my second suggestion on how to improve Biorhythm is to change the mechanic fundamentally and turn it more into a fatigue-style mechanic from Tracia 776. Now, before you close the video or write an angry comment, please hear me out. I'm not saying we should introduce fatigue. What I'm saying is Biorhythm could start off good for your entire army. and while it is good, it may give no bonuses or just some small bonuses, or wouldn't be that consequential. However, as your units fight, their biorhythm will start to degrade. The more combat they see, the more they attack, the more they get hurt, their biorhythm will start to waver. It will take a little while before they'll actually get any penalties, but after prolonged combats, a unit will start to incur stacking penalties to their stats. If you keep fighting with said unit, they will eventually reach a point where they will become utterly useless. Now, of course, there would also be ways to fix your biorhythm, receiving magical healing, for example, or simply ordering your unit not to fight for a turn to give them a moment to breathe. They could also regain biorhythm by being close to an ally that they have a support with. This would incentivize you to keep units together when they have a bond with each other. You could even work the passive bond supports into this. As you may know, Ike protects Soren from critical hits whenever he stands next to him. Maybe Ike and Soren will also restore some biorhythm for as long as they are adjacent to each other. There's a ton of other ways to work this biorhythm mechanic into the game. For example, hearing the Galder of a Heron could be very positive for your biorhythm. This would give your Heron characters a much more important role than just refreshing units. They would literally be your army's biorhythm healers. In fact, what you could do is you could take away their ability to refresh units altogether, give that task over to more traditional bard and dancer style characters, and just have the Herons be there to replenish your biorhythm. That way, you could have multiple of them in your army at the same time. There are also very clever ways you can work this mechanic into certain boss fights. Take Ashnard for example. During his fight, he activates Laran's Medallion, flooding the battlefield with chaotic energy. With this mechanic, you could have this actually affect your entire army. Ashnard could literally sap your army's biorhythm every single turn, making the fight more and more difficult the longer it goes on. I don't know about you guys, but that would have been a much cooler gimmick than him only being able to be damaged by a few characters in the game. Now, of course, this mechanic does run the risk of being a little bit too intrusive and annoying for some players, so on easier difficulties, I would definitely make it so that this mechanic didn't really matter that much, the penalties wouldn't stack to a severe degree, but on the harder difficulties, I would make it so that this would be a resource that you would have to manage if you wanted to beat the game. Alright, so that was my second suggestion on how to fix biorhythm, but I got more. This next one I simply call Order versus Chaos. So this would be another complete reworking of the biorhythm mechanic. In this iteration, biorhythm is a gauge, but you start out in the middle of it, in the neutral zone. Then, to the left, you have Chaos, and to the right, you have Order. Some characters, depending on their personalities, could start further to the left or further to the right. Now, when that character takes certain actions in battle, the gauge will move either towards Chaos or Order. If the character stands still, doesn't initiate attacks, use healing items, or otherwise play very passively, the gauge will start moving towards the Order energy on the rights. The further the gauge moves towards the right, the more the character will be attuned with Order. In this mode, they will gain stacking bonuses to hits, avoid, as well as a buff that reduces the damage they take in battle. This is to represent them keeping their calm and not letting the chaotic energies of the battlefield get to them. Furthermore, this has an additional effect on Laguz type characters. When they are attuned to the energies of Order, they will build their gauge slower while untransformed, but they will also deplete it slower when transformed. However, when a character attacks, deals damage, scores critical hits, lands killing blows, or moves very fast on the overland map, their gauge will start to go to the left, attuning them to the energies of Chaos. The more the gauge goes to the left, they will gain stacking bonuses to damage done as well as critical hit chance. However, they will also get a debuff that reduces their avoid and eventually their critical avoid, making them highly effective at killing enemies, but also putting their life in danger. As with the Order energy, Laguz type characters have an additional effect when they're attuned to the energies of Chaos. Their gauge will deplete faster when they're transformed, but it will also build faster when they're untransformed. I also thought of a super cool way to integrate this mechanic into the Ashera boss fights. Every 3 turns or so during the battle, Ashera will cast an AoE Judgment, and it will affect your entire army no matter where they are. And here's the kicker, it will turn everything it hits into stone, similar to the cinematic, petrifying your character and taking them completely out of the battle. The only way to avoid the Judgment is to have your Order and Chaos bar be completely in the middle. This effectively means that the only way to avoid Ashera's judgment in the boss fight is to perfectly balance the forces of order and chaos. An alternate version of this mechanic that is a little bit less punishing could be that Ashera simply inflicts different statuses on your characters depending on where they are on the gauge. Characters attuned to order will be petrified or put to sleep, characters attuned to chaos will be berserked, and characters in the middle will be silenced. I think this would have been a very cool way to integrate the theme of the Tellius game into the game mechanics of the final boss battle. But the question is, would this mechanic actually be good for the game? Well, it would certainly add a bit of a caveat to your playstyle. If you like to take it slow and turtle up, your characters will be attuned to the energies of order, gaining bonuses to their stats. This would be helpful for newer players who don't like to venture too far out of their comfort zone. However, for risk-taking players who like to play fast and aggressive, they would accumulate a stacking buff to their damage output, allowing them to kill the enemy faster, but at the risk of their characters becoming more likely to die. It is effectively a way to make a game mechanic that capitalizes on risk versus reward. And then we come to my final suggestion on how to improve Biorhythm, and the path that I think they're most likely to take if they ever remake the Tellius games, and that's just, delete it. It sucks. It's a bad mechanic that doesn't really impact the game in any meaningful way, and it's just gonna serve to confuse newer players, so just get rid of it! Anyway, that's all I have to say on the matter. Let me know if you like my ideas for how to improve the Biorhythm mechanic, or if you have some ideas of your own, feel free to post them in the comments section. I'd love to hear your guys' ideas. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe for more Fire Emblem content. My name is Mengs, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye!